Good afternoon. We continue with Avishai Margalit. He has been introduced before, but I will do it again a bit longer. I hope you agree. Avishai Margalit, born 1939, is one of the foremost thinkers and commentators on the contemporary human condition, the moral issues of our time and current problems facing Western societies. In addition to his influence as a philosopher, he is highly regarded for his profound and cogent observations of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the broader struggle between Islam and the West. As the author of Idolatry with Moshe Halbertal, 1992, The Decent Society, 1996, Views in Review, Politics and Culture and the State of the Jews, 1998, The Ethics of Memory, 2002, Occidentalism, the West in the Eyes of Its Enemies, together with Ian Boerma, who is present here, 2004, and On Compromise and Rotten Compromises, 2009. Margalit has transformed philosophical perspectives on a range of political and societal issues. And he has won several awards, Spinoza Lens Award 2001, EMET Prize in the Humanities 2007, and the Israel Prize in Philosophy 2010. You agree with all this?
Yes.
Okay, that's...
You can use it for my obituary.
I won't. I want to speak with you about 3 books, On Compromise and Rotten Compromise, and On the Ethics of Memory and The Decent Society. And I think to get a better understanding of On Compromise and Rotten Compromise, I suggest we start with The Decent Society. I hope that's okay with you. One of the first things I wrote down, it's on already the first page, you give a definition of what a decent society is. There you write, a decent society is one whose institutions do not humiliate people. I distinguish between a decent society and a civilized one. A civilized society is one whose members do not humiliate one another. And for you, morality is very much a matter of humiliation. Can I? Yeah. Perhaps it's evident, but I'd like, can you explain why? Why this is the core of morality?
My sense of, well, I make a distinction between morality and ethics.
Yes.
And the main distinction is between 2 types of human relations that we care about the quality of. Morality, the way I use it, is the relation to strangers, to people in virtue of just being human beings. Ethics is based on thick relations with, the model is family and friends, where there is history to the relation, where the familiarity, when we care about them in a deep way. Now, morality, almost by the very definition, takes into account that the idea of shared humanity. And morality is about the consequences of our shared humanity. Humiliation, on my definition of humiliation, is treating humans as non-humans. And therefore, humiliation is central because humiliation undermines the very idea of morality because treating humans as instruments, as numbers, as statistics, as subhumans, as permanent children, or whatever, there are many manifestations of treating humans as non-humans, is basically undermining morality, and that's why it's so central to my notion.
In this distinction you make between a decent society and a civilized one, can you say that a civilized one is by definition impossible because you can never guarantee that all its members won't humiliate each other? That there's always a chance that a minority will humiliate another minority?
You see, there is always, it's all contingent. So, I mean, institutions and human beings can change in all directions. You can't secure anything. The only thing is, there are 2 intuitions here about morality. Those who think that you have to reform character or human nature. And it's about virtues and human traits. And I don't believe a word of it. I don't believe that people have stable characters. They can be courageous here and not courageous there. They can be courageous in the battle and not courageous in civil life. What I believe is that creating an environment that people behave better. So it's not that the Dutch people are better people in terms of their character, but they behave better than in many other countries because they have a much better surroundings and better institutions. And therefore, what you try, and so the idea is here to work on the idea of creating surroundings which will stabilize behavior.
And which will make it possible for citizens to be civilized.
People will, I mean, here people will queue for the bus. In many countries, they won't queue for the bus because they rarely see the bus, and when it comes, there are hundreds of people trying to get there and will misbehave. It's a battle to get to the bus. So it's not because human beings here somehow reformed their character and became sort of bus queuing.
Of course.
And I think that there are two types of politics that goes with it. Usually conservative politics talks about character and about human nature and about, whereas I think sort of, I don't know, social democrats and other talks about changing the environment. And they have a different view of what human beings are like and are less attached to the idea of character and character traits and virtues and more of how to create tolerable surroundings in which people will behave better. So you can't secure, but you can create better conditions.
But in order to do that, you still need the human beings. You still need...
No, you need human beings, yes.
I mean, you cannot, I mean, you said, and I sympathize with that idea, that you said it's not a matter of character.
Yeah.
But do you think you can, let me rephrase the question, do you think it's possible to establish a decent society in any place?
Yes. I don't think the whole idea...
There are no restrictions on this idea?
No, what I'm saying is that decent society is an attainable ideal. It's not that removed from reality, unless and until there are sort of challenges. So I thought that the Dutch society was approximated itself till it faced a real problem of immigration. Then they started misbehaving. Lots of countries it depends what kind of challenges there are. And it's usually, and the main problem now in the world in terms of creating decent society, the main challenge is immigration, because lots of society behaved reasonably well. Not lots, but at least advanced societies behaved reasonably within their boundaries. But once the boundaries became problematic and immigration started misbehaving. And this I think is a problem, but I don't think that it's insurmountable or something that the whole idea of the decent society, dealing with decent rather than in a just society, is that a decent society is an obtainable ideal.
Let's go back to humiliation one more time. On page 9 of this book you write, humiliation is any sort of behavior or condition that constitutes a sound reason for a person to consider his or her self-respect injured. This, of course, you make also in this book a difference between, I think, the feeling of pride and self-respect. And for you, the self-respect is also based on the idea of a shared humanity.
Yeah.
So can you say a bit more about this self-respect?
Yeah, sure. No, first of all, I mean, you quoted something which for me is important, namely giving reasons or having reasons. There are good reasons and bad reasons for our emotions. If you are terrified of a tiger running after you, you have all the justification in the world to be terrified. If you fly from a fly and you run for your life from a fly,
You're a bit nuts.
you are a bit nut, and you have no reason. So the idea that emotions are, that you cannot justify emotions and there are no good reason or bad reasons is bad. So there are people who are constantly humiliated. There are lots of people who are fishing for insults all the time. And we know, we know the type. Well, you write about them. So I'm dealing with good reasons to feel self-respect. Now, I make a distinction here between honor, social honor, and reasons for social honors, which is vertical idea, and self-respect, which is basically an horizontal. Each one of us can feel or not feel self-respect. And the self-respect is recognizing the humanity in us. And I think that that was a Kantian idea and a good one. And but I feel like a preacher when I talk positively about self-respect. Sort of well, tomorrow I'll be the Sunday preacher. But, and therefore I reverse the discussion and talk about the negative thing, namely what is humiliation, what is hurting self-respect, rather than talking positively, what is it? Because we recognize quite easily when self-respect is injured, whereas it's very hard for us to give an account, positive account, what self-respect is.
We only feel it when we are wounded.
Yes.
Yes. Another quote from the page after this, page 10. Only humans can produce humiliation, although they need not actually have any humiliating intent. So like a disaster, a natural disaster, can have humiliating effects, but for you, it doesn't fit. But
no.
No.
No, I mean, you are devastated, you can feel miserable, you have all the reasons to feel miserable, but you are not humiliated. Whereas if you are become sort of destitute by the society, by other human beings' arrangement and intent, then you have reasons for humiliation.
Even if the other person or the institution doesn't intend to humiliate you?
Yeah.
That doesn't matter?
No, if they create a situation, if it's a byproduct of human arrangements, yeah, then you have a reason to be humiliated. You can feel humiliated by natural disaster if there are institutions that can help you and they don't. But then it's again you have to then human agents have to intervene. If it's just nature as such, it's like being insulted by dogs that bark at you. I mean, it's not a good.
So an animal will also never be able to humiliate a human being? No, that's
well,
good.
Well, some people say that their dogs humiliate them. Yes.
But if my neighbor sends his dog to bite me or asks his dog to bite me, then I have reason to be humiliated by my neighbor.
Yes.
Yes. Now, this is already, I mean, you said already, but I have one more question about it. You make here in this quote a distinction. Morality is greatly concerned. I think this is from the Ethics of Memory. Morality is greatly concerned with respect and humiliation. These are attitudes that manifest themselves among those who have thin relations. Ethics, on the other hand, is greatly concerned with loyalty and betrayal, manifest among those who have thick relations.
Right.
For the thick relations are family, lovers,
right.
wife. Yeah. And in order to speak about a decent society, we just need to focus on morality.
Right.
There's no need to speak about ethics.
I think that I divided my work to morality and to ethics. I mean, recent work. I'm a late comer to this business of morality and ethics. I mean,
how come?
I started in logic and in linguistic philosophy and something very different. But I was terrified of dealing with this stuff for a long time.
Because it's too big or too...
Big and soft. And I fuzzy and sort of vague, and I was terrified of being a preacher and sermonizing, and basically being a bullshitter. And lack of, by bullshit I mean what the way, Harry Funk would, lack of concern with truth.
Yes. But I think it was Leszek Kolakowski who said every philosopher who doesn't think of himself as a bullshit artist from time to time is out of his mind.
Yes.
And yes.
I was most of the time.
I go back to the decent society. Another example of humiliation, you said that individuals have a right to make mistakes in choosing what is best for them. Paternalism, which pretends to speak in the name of the individual's true interests, is especially humiliating. The sense in which paternalism is humiliating is that people are being treated as immature.
Yeah, well, first of all,
No, go ahead.
There was no question mark.
No, but please.
Sure. No, first of all, I think it's important. The idea of making mistakes is crucial. And I think that the whole idea about tolerance and autonomy is all about our ability to live with others' mistakes when it matters. I love my kids dearly, and the real challenge, they come with the wrong person and present, this is my future husband, namely my future son-in-law, my future sister-in-law, daughter-in-law, and you know already by the way they look that it will be end, that he's making it or she is making a terrible mistake, and you know the whole thing how it will end, and yet you have to live with it. And when you really care, that's the challenge of tolerance. Tolerance became sort of something so pale that to resist it is like being against motherhood and friendship. I mean, who can be against? And it's so benign. But the real challenge is really when you live with others that are doing serious mistakes, or in your opinion, and accept the autonomy to make the mistakes. And that's serious.
By preventing these mistakes, which might sound like a good idea, is actually humiliating the other person, or
no, to present the mistake, to deal with them with the mistake, that's fine. To force them, suppose it's in your hand in some way, that's what paternalism is about, then it's wrong. So paternalism is really not taking the maturity of others seriously, and maturity means basically doing mistakes, and that's what we do most of the time, no?
But now you gave an example, a very nice example of the father who is worried about his children. Can you say the same about the state?
With the states, it's even worse. Because, I mean, the states, in the case of your kids, you care so much. The states, you don't even believe them that they really care about you.
No.
And yet they behave as if.
They behave as if, yes.
Yeah, and they use it as if. But the main challenge, I think that the whole attitude to errors and mistakes is crucial. Because that's, I think, was a real change. I mean, most of the religions basically believed that since there is, I can prevent you from going to hell, how come that I won't intervene? Then I don't care for you. And therefore, the whole idea of the straight way, which is in all, if you use the word halakha in the Jewish law, meaning the straight way, in Islam it's the straight way, there is the straight way, and then there are the deviations, and deviations are terrible, and basically mistakes and errors are existential mistakes. Everything is at stake. And the main change, I think, in the secular world is a change in the attitude to mistakes. That's, I think, it's not just that I don't have monopoly on truth because I'm skeptic, and who knows, maybe you're right. No, I can be pretty sure in my position and still have to allow you to make your mistakes. And that's the challenge. The whole idea that I'm wishy-washy because I don't really know, and who knows, and I was wrong, as all those skeptic justification for tolerance, I don't buy them. Sometimes I'm pretty sure in my position, and yet the attitude to mistakes, I think, is a dramatic change.
Again, back, I think also this is already answered, but still a little bit more about self-respect. You write, self-respect in contrast to self-esteem is the honor a person grants herself solely on the basis of the awareness that she is human.
Yeah.
That's the basis for our self-respect.
Right.
That we all, okay.
Whereas self-esteem is by achievements. Namely, you esteem yourself because you think
you're good at something.
You're good at something, yes.
A bit further, you write, it's the basis social confidence of aristocrats that enables them to truly ignore the opinions of others and achieve a self-information independent of the other's attitude. And I think in the context of the book, this page 25, it's clear that we human beings, we citizens, we don't have we don't achieve this self-information. We are dependent all the time on the opinions of others.
Yeah, no, there was an old idea, the Stoic obviously had it, and others. I mean, I see Nietzsche here on your... I mean,
yeah, of course. This is one of the books you want to discuss.
Sure, no. And who had this idea of being utterly confident and not caring about what others think about you. But I think that basically this is, first of all, I think it's the wrong attitude. We should care about what other people think about it because I think there are two basic human orientations that each one of us is caught into. One is competition and one is cooperation. And those are the basic, actually you can, the whole life is how to get right the balance between competition and cooperation, because there is an inner tension between the two. And cooperation needs others. And the mere fact that...
But competition needs others as well.
And the competition needs others. Absolutely. But cooperation in an essential way. In competition, you may say, well, I'm striving against my former achievements. I'll write now a better book or whatever, whatever that's supposed to be.
But you already mentioned the Stoics, and basically at the beginning of this book, you put the two sides against, or the two extremes. On the one hand, you have the Stoic side. On the other hand, the anarchist side. The Stoics, basically, if I rephrase what you were saying, their opinion is a person can never be humiliated because it's all inside him. It's all his own belief, if I may use this word. And anarchists say, by definition, the state, a state institution, is humiliating its citizens.
The idea is the following. The Stoic had this idea of the idea of what they used as the inner citadel. That basically our skull is opaque. You don't know what's going on in my head and in my mind. And therefore, I'm radically free to think whatever I want. It's true that the outside world may treat me badly and shabbily, but why should I care as long as the real freedom is the freedom in my mind, which is defended by this opaque skull. And therefore I'm free. And it doesn't matter whether I'm a slave, as Epictetus was a slave, but he was utterly free in the sense of thinking his own thoughts. And therefore, why should I be humiliated if when you try to humiliate me, I'm utterly autonomous to think my own thoughts, and I can treat you as a barking dog? All right, you are not humiliated by a barking dog. Why should I be humiliated by what people think if I think it's wrong and I'm free to think what I want to think? That was the picture of the Stoic, which is a formidable picture, namely taking the idea that we are not transparent to the world as a basic human condition that make us free. That's one line. The other line, the anarchists, we are constantly humiliated by state institutions, not by all institutions, by state institutions, because it's all there are power mongers trying to limit our autonomy, and therefore they don't treat us basically as human beings by that. So those are the two extreme views.
And according to your book, I would say you're in the middle.
Yeah, but it's not the middle, it's not an arithmetical middle. I see the force of the two approaches, actually. And I was raised, actually, in a home where anarchism was taken very seriously.
Yeah,
my mother was sort of,
an anarchist.
Was for a while, yes.
Because
I have soft spot at least for anarchy. I know the arguments against it, and it's not that I think it's livable, but I take it as a serious challenge. I'll tell you what I take it for. I take it. In science, you have what is called the zero hypothesis. The zero hypothesis is the thing that there is nothing to explain. And therefore, you start, explanations should fight always the zero hypothesis, namely that you explain better than what the zero hypothesis explains, that there is nothing to explain. And I take anarchism to be the zero hypothesis of politics. If you want to defend any position, you have to explain why anarchism is wrong. And that's not an easy thing. People think it's an easy.
But it's not, because somewhere in the end of the book of your book, you also make the claim, and I think rightly so, that even the welfare society can be humiliating. While thinking they're doing good, but basically they're humiliating it.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. So the main idea is basically that I don't take anarchism just as a mere eccentricity. Yeah, well, I mean, you're anarchist and we don't like this regime. No, I think there is something serious there that should be met, and not always met seriously.
But can you say a bit about the dangers of the welfare society becoming humiliating?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, one of the things that conservative attitude or libertarian attitude, negative attitude to the welfare society that should be taken seriously by people like me who advocate the welfare society, is that welfare society sometimes has paternalistic tendencies and trying to teach people what they should do or not should do and make the support of them conditional on that. Then you bureaucratize human relations through the welfare society. And I compared the two societies. One is the welfare society with its highly bureaucratic, and the charity society of especially religious communities, where it's a direct help without bureaucratic relations. And there are virtues. I mean, there are good things to say on each one of them and bad things to say on each one of them, and they can go very, very wrong. What I don't believe is that a modern society can be a charity society. It should be by rights, not by...
Because in a modern society there are not enough thick relations?
Yes, one reason, and secondly the complexity and the needs. And you can't secure what is needed by just being goodwill of other people, especially with decline of human solidarity in modern society. I think this is one of the most problematic aspects of modern, and that's why I mentioned the immigration, when you suddenly see that, I mean, even working class solidarity that was so strong, suddenly when they meet immigrants that should have joined the working class, suddenly there is lack of solidarity.
But also, I mean, the working class solidarity disappeared because many of the working class became middle class.
Absolutely. That's part of my argument. That's what I'm now dealing with.
That's also what
with this problem. Yeah.
You mentioned also human rights. I think that's very logic. You write, the justification for human rights is that they're meant to protect human dignity. Then a few sentences after that, these rights are seen as good in and of themselves.
Yeah.
So again, human rights are very much connected to humiliation and dignity, of course. Dignity is the absence of being humiliated. Can you say?
Yeah, no, I'll tell you, it's a catchphrase that I wrote almost irresponsibly so. I'll tell you why. Because the human right, lots of people try to come up with a theory of human rights and find a justification for human rights. What is sort of common to all human rights? Now, if you look at the actual Declaration of Human Rights, it was a hodgepodge of lots of things. And there were different tendencies. It came from, for example, Catholics were very important. Jacques Maritain, the philosopher, were very important and there are rights that you cannot say that those rights have to do with human dignity. And I don't want to give up on those rights. So if the list of rights is what is in the Declaration of Human Rights, I cannot say in good faith that they are only there to protect human dignity. They are doing all sorts of other things. But yes, but the basic picture of why human rights is an important project is, I think, to defend human dignity.
But we have a bit, if I listen correctly, you said there are too many laws. We made it too big.
Yes.
We should go to the...
No, I mean, there are two problems. First of all, the people who advocate, many countries that advocate human rights never believed in a word of it. They just signed it because it was joining a nice club or whatever, or respectable club. They never believed in any of it. Actually, the belief in human rights is not sort of, is very shaky in lots of places. Yeah. And then the issue of what should to include or not, you can't make, in order to really to give bite to human rights, the list should be narrower than what and not everything that we think is good for human beings should be there, because then you can't really fight for what is basic. And there should be something compellingly basic about human rights, and not just every good feature that we want from human rights should be there.
But for example, would you say that education is a human right?
That what?
Education?
Oh, sure. But education, but then it depends what university education, the minimum that the society can provide, is it writing and reading? I mean, then it becomes already highly problematic. Right. I would say, I mean, at least I think it's Dostoevsky had this he has this beautiful Satan, Stavrogin, in The Possessed, who says that everyone is entitled to have an umbrella. And yeah, I think umbrella, well, Ian and I went here to the woods with an umbrella that were provided, and we would be more miserable without umbrella, but I still don't believe that umbrella is a basic human right. Education, I think, is more relevant, but how to to formulate it in a convincing way is not trivial.
It's not easy. No. A bit more on the difference between dignity and pride and self-esteem. Yeah, you say dignity is similar to pride. Pride is the expression of self-esteem. Dignity is the expression of the feeling of respect persons feel towards themselves as human beings. Yeah. Dignity is the representation, a bit further, of self-respect.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I think that there are two sides to the same coin, namely the presentation of the self and the way we treat ourselves innerly. So one of the things which I think is the most important human capacity is that we can adopt two perspectives simultaneously. First-person perspective, what we see from within, but we can treat ourselves and think ourselves from third-person perspective. So you can treat a pain in your leg as a first person, namely you feel the pain and you react to it, but you can also analyze it almost as a doctor, what's going on here and why the pain is there. Now, in a case of presentation of the self, you try to adopt, and one of them is a first-person perspective, another is a third perspective to yourself. And I think this is very important. I add, and I think this is a project of mine, to use this ugly word, that there is a second-person perspective. And I think for morality and ethics, that's a crucial perspective. How I view you and you view me and not as a third person and not as a first person. I think it stands on its own and it has many implications. And one of the founders of this institute, Martin Buber, that's basically what he tried to advocate, the second person. He never used, I don't
Ich und du.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I and thou, I don't know why thou, do became thou. Thou made it, I mean, sort of a preacher's word. But do, that's I think is an important insight, yeah.
You give, and you base, it's based on Kant, and his name is already used a few times this today. The whole concept of human dignity, according to you, it goes back, among others, to Kant, and you list a few things that are needed to establish this concept. The first one is being a creature who determines ends, that is, a creature who gives things values.
That was Kant's position, that there is something. Kant basically talked about us as persons, and who can set aims and goals, and that's what is unique to human beings. My claim is that that being human beings is enough, and we don't need any dignified and elevated traits. Namely, that even if someone is retarded, or someone lost his mind, a human being, or someone who doesn't meet Kant's high criteria, still we should treat with human dignity. Actually, this is especially the cases where human dignity is called for. The insane, the retarded, the terminally ill, and so on, who don't meet those criteria.
Yeah.
And therefore, I believe that the basic attitude is coming from iconic relation, namely, you are in my image, even when you are sick and ill and not in your faculties. Literally, I recognize you, my image as a human being. So it's not that we are in the image of God, but we are in the image of each other. And that's, I think, this primitive attitude is the basic of it all.
That should be enough.
Yeah.
Whether the human being is rational or more capable, it doesn't matter.
It has nothing to do with rationality, capacity for agency, being able to devise aims or nothing. The mere fact that we are human beings, that should be enough.
But later also, and this comes back in on compromise and rotten compromise, money as a tool of making compromises. In the decent society, you make a distinction between the use value and the exchange value. The use value is the value of the benefit obtained from an object in the fulfillment of human ends. Exchange value is the object's power to induce other people to give other objects of value in order to obtain it. Why are these two things important when it comes to the humiliation? What's the importance of this?
Because the main thing, I mean, we are basically given in two basic orientations, and I call it, let's call it, I did it here in the Compromise in Rotterdam, the religious picture, not necessarily tied with religion, but with the religious picture and the economic picture. In the economic picture, economics is based on exchange. And I mean, in
rudimentary
economy, it's a barter economy. You give me the book and I give you
the glass.
I give you the glass. That's a good bargain.
That's a good bargain.
And then exchanging for money. But basically, the main idea is things are exchangeable. Whereas in the religious attitude, there are things which are not transferable and not exchangeable. And we have it even, I don't know,
and these are the holy things, excuse me.
Yes.
Yes.
But even, in Hebrew, there is no distinction between meat and flesh. So if you go to the butcher and give me my
meat.
My meat, it can be my flesh or not. But then we know that, we all are horrified by the Jew from Malta and by the merchant of Venice asking for
a pound of flesh.
A pound of flesh. Because we think that flesh is not something which is transferable. And in the same way, the book that you wrote is different from the book that you own.
Yeah.
You have a possessive attitude. Now, there are things which are not exchangeable. You can sell the right, but you don't sell the fact that you wrote the book and it's your ownership in that sense. Mm-hmm. And the point, I think that there are something important, namely in not having all human relations based on exchanges, namely unreplaceable, on making things redundant. And I think that redundancy and exchangeability of all, that's a bad thing. And making everything holy and non-exchangeable is terrifying. So the point is how to find the blend between the two.
Compromise.
Yeah.
Of course, it's obvious why making everything holy is dangerous, but also this is an argument, I think you used also in this book, against the radical libertine position, that even if it's between consenting adults, not everything should be changed for a certain amount of money or certain services.
No, there is one thing, I think, in all law systems that you cannot sell yourself as a slave. I guess that it's in the Dutch.
I hope.
Well,
I'm not sure, but I assume.
Sorry? No, I think that even the two, if between two consenting adults, one thinks that his aim in life is to serve the other as a servant because the other is so magnificent or just being a sadomasochist or masochist, namely in this case, and the other being the sadist. You cannot make yourself a slave. So there are constraints on exchanges. Very severe, actually, exchange, more than we think about. I just brought you cannot sell. Now, can you sell your kidney?
Exactly.
Yeah, sure.
Yes,
no, but those are really serious questions to ask.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, some people make the claim that if you work for below a certain, if your wage is very low, this is already slavery. You sold already yourself as a slave. So there's like...
No, sure. But the point, I talked about slave. Slave, not metaphorical slave.
A bit about freedom also from the Decent Society. Radical freedom means that although a person's past actions, character, and environment constitute a set of constraints on her future actions, they nevertheless do not determine these actions. A bit later, animals have natures, human beings do not. So the dignity, the aspect of human dignity, according to you, it's important that we can change. We are not prisoners of what we did in the past.
No, I think we are influenced by what we did in the past, but I accept, I think, what the existentialist picture, that at each point you can radically change your life. And this possibility, which is not always likely to happen, because people, by inertia or goes on with the past, but the mere fact that we can do it and people prove that they can do it and change their life in a radical way, is, I think, the main source of human being.
And I mean, you already said why we need to have this. Why we cannot humiliate like retarded people or people who are not capable of being a moral agent. But also, you wrote that the litmus test for every society is how the society treats its prisoners. And one of the reasons you give for treating prisoners as human beings is that they're capable of changing.
Yes, I think that the idea of people changing even being capable of forgiveness, namely changing in such a way that this is always a human possibility. And this, I think, again, I mean, the reason why I stammer and stutter now is because this is the stuff that make you a preacher. But it's a serious, I mean, the implications of radical ability for radical change is, I think, very important. Kant thought that hanging you as a punishment is treating you as a human being, because you don't punish an animal, you can punish a human being. And I think that's for the birds. Yes, I think basically treating human beings with dignity is never giving up on them.
Never?
Yeah, namely, yeah. Now you'll ask me, what about Himmler?
No, I won't. Yeah. No. I will ask you a different question, because when we drove from Amsterdam to Leusden, you said you had lots of sympathy for the action, a tooth for a tooth, an eye for an eye. So that's different. You can.
No.
Well, maybe I go too fast, but explain this sympathy. Why?
No, I said we all start with the idea of rough justice. And then revenge as a rough justice resonates with lots of us. We hear a terrible, sort of a cruel act by someone, and the first instinct is, of sort of revenge. And revenge not just as a crazy act, but as a sort of a rough justice. But the main thing that we all did, and that's what is the basis of our civilization, is giving up on our...
Revenge.
On revenge, basically. If you ask what is all law and what is really all about, is giving up to assert to the state or to other agency.
Or to God.
Or to God. We'll come to God later.
Okay.
To give up on revenge, namely to transfer this tendency. If you look at really what the implications are immense of not reacting on and lots of not reacting on revenge, and lots of people, lots of countries, and I think that's a tension between liberal states and non-liberal states. Why other non-liberal states feel that the liberal states are a bunch of phonies and hypocrites, because they think that they gave up on some basic human emotion, the need for immediate satisfaction when you are wronged. And to give up on the immediate satisfaction of revenge or settling the score, they think there is something bizarre and not, and actually I see it on a daily basis in the way we discuss politics in Israel. There are people, they think that we people are phony, are really inauthentic in a fundamental way for not asking for revenge. And since the Middle East, for example, is a continuous blood feud with settling scores all the time, to the point in which you don't even remember what was the original case. But it's a sort of like Sicilian or like Icelandic sagas of 300 or 500 years of settling scores. But still what people understand is the last act, and you have to revenge for that. And I think that the issue of giving up on revenge as just rough justice is the basic of our civilization.
Can you say that there's an exchange? We gave up on this need for rough justice, and what we got back is like a sense of security and safety?
Yes, we got an orderly society. And that's, I think, that's crucial. And we got a society.
So it's a good bargain? It's a good bargain?
I think so. But it's not only utilitarianly true. I think it's also morally was the right move, because with rough justice, usually it's too rough. Rough justice was to the family, to sort of, it wasn't necessarily to the one. You didn't punish the one who did, you punished someone in the surrounding who were more vulnerable. So rough justice is usually wrong because you make sort of blood relation the object rather than the one who did the wrong thing.
Again, a bit about the free person against the slave. There you say the difference between a free person and a slave is the nature of the stimuli activating them. The possible of radical change in one's future conduct is the result of conditioning and not of choice. It thus cannot serve as a justification for human dignity. My question is about the difference between the distinction between conditioning and choice. I mean, to a certain degree, you already mentioned children, raising children. Aren't we? We are conditioned all the time, aren't we?
Oh, of course. And I don't think that our life are based on a substance or on a whole set of conditioning and indoctrination. There is no education without indoctrination. But then there is education, namely critical way of thinking, not reacting to conditioning. And I think the whole idea of not being, the differences between reflex and reflection. Conditioning is about reflexes, and education and is about reflection. And I think you cannot have reflection without reflexes. But then you have to delay the reaction and then you start reflecting. That's, I think, what is so humanly important. That we can delay unlike maybe animals, we can delay our satisfaction, not reacting right away and reflecting them. And that's, I think, an important distinction.
But can you say that also the state is capable and busy and doing it all the time is conditioning its citizens?
States are usually trying to condition. Of course, power relations usually try to condition and not, I mean, we talked about deliberation and public deliberation and arguing, but that's, we are brainwashed. I mean, there are lots of propaganda. We know how it goes. But a good society is a society that enables, and in the public arena, reflection, not just reflexes. And that's crucial.
And this also enables its citizens to make mistakes.
Sure.
Yeah. Again, about, you mentioned Hegel's account of the master-slave dialectic. The master wants absolute power over the slave, but he also wants the slave to recognize his absolute power. And you said this is a contradiction. You cannot.
No, the idea is the following. Basically, it was the Hegelian idea that many of our basic projects, human projects, are self-defeating. You love someone, and you want her to be. I mean, you want her to be autonomous on the one hand. On the other hand, you do everything for her not to be autonomous because you want her only for yourself, and you undermine the very relation. We want. Ajax wants to beat Eindhoven 6-0 in a game, but if it's 6-0, it's not worth winning. So it's 2-1 is better, but then it's not enough of a defeat. So you are caught in this relation that you want to smash the other team, but when you smash the other team, it's not worth it. It's not a real achievement.
You want a worthy opponent.
And we have, that's the model of being caught in the master-slave. That was Hegel's basic idea, is that the master wants to control the slave completely. On the other hand, he wants recognition of the slave, of him as a master. And the slave is unlike a dog. It's not just a trained dog, but a slave that should recognize the master as a master. So the minute he yields to the slave this status of that the slave should recognize him as such, it's self-defeating. He wants total control, and yet he's caught with this idea of the slave recognizing him. And the basic idea, the Sartre and other people who were influenced by Hegel, the idea was that the basic human projects are of that kind. They are self-defeating. They have an inherent element in what you do that undermine the very project. You want total control, and you want recognition, and the two don't go together.
And this also why you think that a decent society is possible and a just society is probably self-defeating?
That's too fast.
That's too fast?
That's too fast. This just society, I don't know whether it's self-defeating, but I know that it's hard to achieve. And I make a distinction, maybe you'll come to ask me about it, but I'll make a distinction between ideals and second best, which is a crucial thing. I think that our imagination is shaped, our human imagination, political and moral, is shaped by the idea that there is an ideal and it's a peak of a mountain and we are climbing. We know that there are difficulties, and even if we don't get to the peak, we should climb as close to the peak as we can get. And so there is the idea that we can always approximate and get higher and higher. And my claim is that this can be a wrong model. And I give an example. If you want to go to the Caribbean,
and then you end up in the sea,
and you have not enough fuel in your airplane, don't try to approximate the Caribbean because you'll end somewhere in the bed of the sea. Go to another place. Try Antalya in Turkey or somewhere else. So the second best means that you should sometimes take an altogether different
position,
different strategy, rather than assuming that, all right, there are difficulties, but even with the difficulties, we'll approximate the... And this was important because, for example, Paulus had this idea that the ideal for human beings is total devotion to God, and namely, for women to be a nun. But then, since most of the people, if they are left to their own devices, in such cases will fornicate, so it's better for them to get married as a second best.
To being a nun.
Rather than trying to be a nun without being really a nun. So this I think is important because lots of, the book is about second best options rather than about the ideal. That's the basic intuition.
On page 119, you describe an important trait for being a human being, that's freedom. You say this is true under the assumption that rejecting human beings as humans means rejecting them as beings capable of freedom, since it is freedom that makes them humans rather than mere things. And also that, I think a few pages before, that another sense of humiliation is taking away the self-control of a human being. This is another important example. So where does this start, the self-control? When is the self-control being taken away?
Well, I mean, we do it all the time. I mean, we put people in prison and take the freedom from them. and obviously there are punishments, but what I'm advocating, especially in the case of how to treat prison, is really reducing the element of humiliation in the very act of making them prisoners. And the issue is, if I tie you completely and if I chain you, then in many cases that's an humiliating act, namely that you are not sovereign on your body. And not being a sovereign of your body, we take it usually as a sign of deep humiliation. Now, people were, the French people were, I think, very shocked when they saw Strauss-Kahn in a chain being brought to court, which is a routine thing in America, yeah. Well, they should have been shocked for other things that he did, but they were shocked. And I think seeing people in chains usually makes us cringe because we feel that chain is a humiliating practice, yes.
But also you can say that certain people enjoy the image of seeing other people.
Oh, sure, no. People enjoy all sorts of things, yes. The point is whether they have good reasons to enjoy them. People get all sorts of crazy joys from... No, first of all, I mean, see someone who is powerful now being brought in chain. And he obviously, I mean, I think... I don't know why I got into Strauss-Kahn.
Well, because of the self-control.
No, but I think that there is something noble, whatever you say about America, that there was something noble about them bringing him to court in America and right away. I think in most countries he would have got out of the country and not being... I think that was something actually, listening to an African immigrant woman and taking her seriously and acting against one of the most powerful persons on earth and taking him from the airplane and putting him in a castle. That I think was quite remarkable. I don't think that I don't know whether Holland would have matched the test.
So this is a sign, perhaps.
No, I can see the Method Hotel asking. Well, we have to talk to the Ministry of.
Maybe you can offer some money and we can.
No, something about it, whatever, and then he would have. Yeah.
So is this a sign? Is this a proof of the US being a decent society?
No, it's a proof that in US, I think the rule of law is taken. I think there is something about the rule of law with all the, American terrible judicial system. There is something dignified there. Yes, I know people can't stand many aspects of American judicial system, a system that puts 1% or 2% of the population in jail. I mean, it's an insane system, but this case, this democratization of the judicial system and taking complaints seriously, that's, I must admit, that's impressive.
A few more things before we go to the compromise book. An important aspect of a decent society is, according to your book, is a sense of shame, the capability of being ashamed. So you write, the idea is that a decent society is one that has not lost its sense of shame, that is, a society whose members are ashamed of acts of humiliation and abuse. So as a citizen, you should also be ashamed when an institution of the state is humiliating other
First
citizens.
of all, shame is an infectious emotion. You feel shame for sometimes who is on the stage and makes a fool of himself. If I now, talk to you utterly incoherently, many people may fidget on my behalf. Because, shame and embarrassment are infectious relations. And I use shame and not guilt, namely the outer representation of shame. And I think shame is an important, yes, I think that Shame plays a...
What exactly, you explained also in your book, but I'm asking it now already. What, according to you, is the difference between shame and guilt? How would you...
I think, Bernard Williams, that it's between white emotions and red emotions. In shame, you get red in your face. In guilt, you get white in your face. Although we say leave it with but I think that shame is the way, in shame there is an outside look at you. In guilt, it's you viewing yourself. And I think that's, an important distinction between...
So when you're ashamed, you always feel the eye or the view of the other.
The view of the other. Yeah. It's the view and the view in both senses.
Right. Yeah. Another thing that's already, you already mentioned immigration. Also, you say humiliation is the rejection of legitimate encompassing groups. And then one of the aspects of an encompassing group is the membership in a group is a matter of belonging rather than achievement. I think this is particularly interesting nowadays in Western Europe, but in many other societies. So, can you say a bit about when exactly is a group a legitimate encompassing group, and how does the humiliation work?
No, encompassing groups are groups with many features. And encompassing groups are many features. But what I made here is a distinction between two types of human orientation, which sociologists talk all the time about ascriptive and all. They have more or less the same idea. I think they treat it differently, but basically the idea is that there are two basic human orientation. One orientation is achievement, namely, and this can be the achievement here is not necessarily a very flowery or highfalutin achievement. You go you expect the bus driver to take you
to
some place that you ask, and competently. And if he or she are not good at it, you simply will go to another bus or do something else. And that's achievement orientation. And we treat usually other people with thin relation on an achievement basis, whether they can fulfill what we need. We shouldn't treat them only as such. They are not machines. But basically, that's the thing we expect. The belonging orientation is my son, whatever he does. He may be a total flop. He may be very disappointing on all counts.
He may be a murderer.
He may be a murderer. Now the question, what would have happened had he been a Nazi? I don't know. But that's usually the ultimate question, and I'll stop here. But the basic idea is that in belonging doesn't hinge on achievement. It's the mere relation of belonging. And I believe that ethics deals mainly with belonging relations and morality with achievement, but then you make only humanity as a belonging condition for morality. But all the rest is given to achievement. Now, encompassing group, let's skip it because, there are 6 conditions. You don't want me to.
Okay, but
you don't want me to mention.
I think it's because it's important to mention that a decent society does not humiliate these groups.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, I think I have to skip a few things in order to go to uncompromised and rotten compromise. Basically, what you're doing also there in this book is you aim for second best by exchanging justice for peace. If I summarize it, it's too high, but this is what one of the aims. You're trying to explain how to do it and when you should not do it. Am I correct?
Yes, but it's a qualified yes, so let me qualify. The basic idea is the following. People talked a great deal about tension between basic values. And the values that people talked most about were equality and freedom. And justice is basically the way you negotiate these two values. Justice is the people's sense of what should be the right relation between equality and freedom. But people sense that there is an inherent tension between freedom and equality. So libertarians or liberals and us say freedom is the ultimate value, equality puts constraint on freedom, whereas socialists say equality is the main thing and freedom should be constrained by relations of equality, and that's by now almost banal. What is not banal, I think, is my claim that there is an inner tension between justice and peace, or it can be. And we all talk about, I mean, the slogan, especially in my country, I hear it from Palestinian, I hear it, we want just peace. And we want just peace, people talk like fish and chips. I mean, there are two complementary things, they always goes together. And they usually don't. If you want justice, you won't get peace, in many cases. And the question is, how much justice are we willing to give up in order to gain peace? And I say quite a bit we should do. That's the basic idea, yeah.
But of course, you say, when should we not compromise? When should we not give up a certain justice? You make very nice, you have the metaphor of the fly in the ointment and the cockroach in the soup. You say like a fly in the ointment, then the ointment, if you get rid of the fly, the ointment can still be used. Whereas when you have a cockroach in the soup is inedible. You cannot eat the soup anymore. So when we have, metaphorically speaking, a cockroach in the soup, it's a rotten compromise, and we should reject it.
No, the idea is, no. There is first, before the metaphor.
Okay, before the metaphor. Okay.
Before the metaphor, the idea is the following. Compromises, there are good compromises and bad compromises all the time. It depends on the deal. But they are morally allowed always, apart from those cases when you make a compromise with an inhuman regime, a regime that's of cruelty and humiliation, extreme cases of regimes of cruelty of humanity. Making a deal with Hitler is of that kind, for example.
That's what your example of 38 Munich, you say the deal itself is not rotten, but it was rotten because it was signed by Hitler.
Right. But that's one. Now, I asked a different question. If you have a deal, a complicated deal, like the Yalta deal, which most of it is fine, but there are items in the deal which are rotten, like handing over the Russians prisoners of war to Stalin, knowing that they will be murdered, which was part of the secret agreement of Yalta, wasn't known at the time, apart from the people who were involved. The question is, if you have an item in a whole deal, does it vitiate the whole deal? And there I make a distinction between a cockroach in the soup and a fly in the ointment. If you have a cockroach in the soup, you cannot say the soup is delicious, but there is a cockroach which is bad. The soup is very bad and the soup is no good and you just leave it as it is. If it's a fly in the ointment, or in the, I don't know, fly in the honey, then you remove the fly and the rest is fine. And so there are cases when one element in the whole thing disqualify the whole thing, and there are things in which it doesn't. And my claim was that in the Yalta case, I think that this was a very bad part. It was a cockroach in the soup, basically.
Also in this book, you quote the Jewish law that there are three instances that a person, a Jew, should give up the right, his life, and he should say, come what may. I think it's to dishonor the name of God and to kill a fellow human being. I'm not sure what was the third one.
No, there are... Judaism...
That's not... okay, go ahead.
You didn't want to...
No,
but you want...
So I want to speak come what may, but that's what I want to speak. But please explain what you want to say about Judaism, and then we go back to come what may.
Now, Judaism has this idea that basically there are three things that you should never transgress and never give up on. One is incest, one is idolatry, and one is shedding blood. These are the things that are non-negotiable, come what may. The rest is, I mean, if you are forced to do it on other things, then you have no option, then you transgress. But these are the three things that you should be able to, you should commit yourself, and you are committed not to do come what may, whatever the consequence, including basically giving up your life. Yeah.
And you say come what may, if you sign an agreement with a state or a regime that humiliates its citizens, or some of its citizens, then we should say come what may, and we should not sign the agreement.
No, not just humiliate, no. It's more stringent. Lots of regimes humiliate. What I say is that inhuman
crimes
regimes...
against humanity.
Right. If a regime is based...
That destroys the idea of morality itself.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Then we should say come.
Then we should say, no, don't make a deal. We may be forced to do it under, not as a deal, not as a compromise. So, for example, let's assume that North Korea is threatening South Korea with nuclear weapon. Then it's not a compromise between the two, it's a threat. So, and if you come to me with a gun, your life or your money, I don't compromise when I give you the money. So there is one thing, what do you do under threat? And another is, what do you do as a compromise? Namely, as a deal, as a free agent for a deal.
And when you when you act under threat, then you also you wrote a sentence, we understand, we do not justify. So if somebody acts under threat and he transgresses, afterwards we may understand. We do not justify his act, but is understanding the same as forgiveness? Is it next?
No, what I'm making is the distinction, I think an important one, that the lawyers do between justification and excuse. There are lots of cases that are unjustified. Even obviously torture is unjustified. Now what if you tortured someone in a ticking bomb, namely she knows the information of a ticking bomb. It's never justified. But it can be sometimes accused after the deal, namely, you are not justified, you shouldn't have done it, but we understand why you did it, and we may excuse or forgive according to, or partially forgive. So there are deals that are unjustified, but are excusable. So
that's what you mean by understanding.
Understanding, namely that we know that we most likely would have behaved the way you did, although knowing that it's unjustified. And I think there are lots of cases that are unjustified but excusable.
Also in this book you refer to Hobbes, and you say that when we take his account seriously, that man is a wolf to other men, then security overrides all moral considerations. But you believe that he was wrong, and it's not so much man against man. You have this very nice saying, it's my brother and I against my cousin and I against the world.
Well, my claim is the following. Hobbes started with a very powerful idea. He asked, the basic question of politics is why should we obey the government and why the government has the right to rule? That's the basic question of politics. And Hobbes has an answer. And the answer is the right for government to rule and your obligation to obey the government comes from one idea, namely security, namely, otherwise it would be a jungle with a total war, each individual at a constant war against others. That's Hobbes' famous answer. Therefore, you need a sovereign who comes from the outside and has a total control. Apart from one thing, he can't kill you because that's what he was about to save. So apart from that, that's the basic idea of Hobbes. Put crudely, but that's the idea. And I said that we are not at a war. A man to when a man is a wolf, as Hobbes used this metaphor, I think we are not at a war of all against all, because if we were at a, even conceptually we are not such, because if we were at a total war of all against all, there wouldn't have been children in the world and no families and nothing. So after one generation, humanity would have disappeared. That's a fantasy world that wouldn't have lasted more than one generation. So mother is not at a war with her son, and a father not with the mother, and so
Seldom.
on. Yeah. So they are at a war of a different kind, yeah. Not a murderous war. So I don't buy the very distinction. I do believe that Freud had a much better idea of having those hordes, basic hordes of a pack of human beings, and with thick relations, blood relations, with complicated blood relations as he describes, and they may be at a war with other groups. That's a much better. So Hobbes, I think, was actually, when he described the international relations, he was far more accurate than describing human relations on individual basis. That's why I don't buy the basic.
But also your point is that in politics we need to deal with tribalism.
Yes. The main... The main thing, as I said, there are these two attitudes, morality, how to deal, what is the quality of our relations with human beings and with strangers, and our relation to the people that are near and dear to us, friends, family, lovers, whatever, people who belong to our ethnic group, to our religion, whatever, that we care about. And the point is, there is a tension between the two. And the tension is how, because the relation to strangers constrain us with the relation to the people who are near and dear. And tribalism is the idea that basically all that we should care about is is ethics and thick relation, and we shouldn't care about all the outsiders.
And then there's no shared humanity anymore.
And then there is no shared humanity.
I'd like to end, because we have no time anymore, with a quote from The Ethics of Memory about forgiveness. It's at the end of the book. You say that, I maintain that what is needed for successful forgiveness is not forgetting the wrong done, but rather overcoming the resentment that accompanies it. It's like forgetting an emotion in the sense of not reliving it when the memory of the event comes to mind. Is a compromise an act of forgiveness?
No. Forgiveness, I'll finish with forgiveness, and forgive me if this is my last word. If you wronged me, by forgiveness, I regain my sovereignty. A sovereign, a political sovereign, is someone who is entitled to give amnesty without justification, gratis, and shows and proves the sovereignty by exactly this act. Forgiveness doesn't call for justification. It's a gift. It's an act. It's gratis. And forgiveness is important as a reaction for a wrong done to me, not because of you, but because of me who was wronged, because I regain my sovereignty. If you ask me for forgiveness, you recognize me again as somebody powerful, as a sovereign.
A sovereign, yeah.
Yes. That's my idea of what forgiveness is. Forgiveness, I think, is the relation. It's a gift relation. Now, gift has an exchange element in it, but it's not only an exchange. The exchange expresses the gift. The exchange is not the goal of the gift. So, forgiveness is important, I think, extremely important in human relations, not because of the kind of justification that it has, on the contrary, but because of regaining sovereignty.
Well, one last question, amigo. Can forgiveness be humiliating?
If I do, you ask me for forgiveness, and I forgive you. I mean, I trivialize it by uttering it in a tone of voice that trivializes the wrong. We know that you wronged me. Yeah, I forgive you. No? As if you just stepped over my toe in the bus. Yeah, fine. Forget it or something. Then it can be humiliating. Namely, not taking. It took me an effort to recognize that I wronged you in a serious way. I asked for forgiveness, and you dismiss me offhand. Then it can be humiliating. Yes.
Thank you, Avishai. I hope you didn't humiliate anybody.